Not many Hollywood murder mysteries ever took a more dramatic turn than police are describing in a couple of savage Beverly Hills killings.
The accused brothers did not appear in open court until after more than an hour of discussion between attorneys in the judges' chambers. 22-year-old Lyle and 19-year-old Eric Menendez were formally charged with murdering their wealthy parents for their millions.
Now to the Menendez Brothers case, we're hearing new audio of them speaking from behind bars, as the Los Angeles District Attorney says he'll review new evidence while considering resentencing the brothers.
I went to the only person that has ever helped me, that has ever protected me. And then, ultimately, this happened. He was arrested because of me.
Do you remember the Austin serial explosions that occurred between March 2nd and the 21st back in 2018? Which mostly in Austin, Texas? So in total, 5 packages exploded, taking the lives of 2 people and injuring another 5. The perpetrator, 23-year-old Mark Anthony Condit of Pflugerville in Texas, he was pulled over by police. He detonated an explosive inside his vehicle, and sadly it took his life, injured somebody else. So this was kind of a family affair. Allow me to explain. He was the eldest of 3 offspring. He attended Austin Community College from 2010 to 2012, remember those dates, leaving without graduating but in good academic standing. He was homeschooled by his mother, who in February of 2013 officially graduated him from high school. Yeah, he did high school after college. Makes sense to me. He wrote blog posts in 2012 where he identified as a conservative who was not that politically inclined. He argued against a lot of controversial things, including a certain registry. He was reportedly a part of a club called the Righteous Invasion of Truth, and the club's members, they homeschooled people. They practiced survivalism and all sort of held these ideals. So I see the evil in this family, don't you? The House of Borgia was the first ever crime family. So during the reign of Pope Alexander VI, formerly known as Rodrigo Boria, they were suspected of many crimes, including but not limited to adultery, interfamilial relations, theft, bribery, taking of lives, mostly from a heavy hand with some fun little poisonous things. Because of their grasping for power, they made enemies of the Medici, the Sforza, and the Dominican friar Girolamo Savonarola, amongst many others. They stand out in history as being infamously steeped in sin and immorality, and I think you can see why. So going back to that mention of Alexander VI's reign, this family hosted a lot of naughty fun adult parties in the Vatican Palace. You ever hear of the Banquet of Chestnuts? It is considered one of the most disreputable balls of this kind, with reports of 50 courtesans in attendance for the entertainment of the banquet guests. While a cardinal, Pope Alexander maintained a long-term illicit relationship with one Venosa de Catani, so that's how he had some family. He had 4 offspring: Giovanni, Cesare, Lucrezia, and Geoffrey. And speaking of those offspring, Cesare went on to take the life of Giovanni in hopes of gaining more power within the family, and was successful on that front. Lucrezia was a notorious poisoner and became famous for her skill at political intrigue, also the mysterious passings and disappearances of her husbands. So, whole family doing stuff. Genghis Khan rose from obscurity in a small corner of the Mongolian steppe to form the largest land empire in history. The Mongols, often outnumbered, conquered through their mastery of tactics and psychological manipulation. So they made a deal with people. If you surrender, we're gonna treat you okay, we're gonna allow you to enjoy the fruits of a secure world. But if you're gonna resist, well, you and your entire city is going to feel the fury of all of us. Now, if you didn't resist, you did have personal liberty, you had the freedom to follow your religion, but at what cost? Because some experts calculate that 11% of the world's population passed because of the Mongol expansion. At its height, Renaissance Florence was a center of enormous wealth, power, and influence, a republican city-state funded by trade and banking. Its gnarly political scene was dominated by rich families, the most famous of which were the Medici family. So at the end of the 14th century, they opened their own bank, and over the next century, they would become the wealthiest family in Europe. They had branches everywhere, but bad loans, questionable business decisions all began to chip away at the bank's fortune. Eventually, problems got so bad that the family was embezzling money from the state treasury, even charitable funds. And we all know about heinous Queen Catherine Medici, right? The Queen Mother had a rebellious daughter named Margaret, who dared to cross her, and Catherine was like, I'm getting my revenge. She ordered her daughter's romantic interest to lose his life in front of her. Thankfully, her son, King Henry, found that cruel and was like, okay, maybe let's do this in private, but still, like, The 4 Gonzalez sisters ran a successful place of body selling from 1945 until the police shut it down in 1964, and their employees were not employees. These were people working against their will. This family had kidnapped quite a few. Other people answered false advertisements. And when you arrived at this new place of business to work there, the sisters would provide, some spicy spoon juice if you were reluctant, because they needed to provide a service. And that's how they did it. Sadly, when folks became unable or reluctant to do what they had to do, the sisters ended them. If a client turned up with a lot of money, he too might end up kind of in the ground. When police eventually raided the property, they found the bodies of 90 people. And there was probably many, many more that were undiscovered. Eventually, the Mexican courts were like, yep, 40 years in prison. And fun fact, Guinness World Records has named them the most prolific end-of-life partnership ever. And Nessa Tarvaldiyeva, along with her husband Roman Podkovev and their daughters Victoria and Anastasia, officially began their end-of-life spree in 2008 until they were apprehended in 2013. But there's a couple of outliers that go back to 1998, so just do the math. So we're going to begin this in 2008 when the family took the life of Mikhail Zlednev, head of the Information Security Department of the State Controlled Substance Service, and his wife in their home. And while we know how they ended them, I can't describe what they used other than saying one weapon is traditionally used for chopping vegetables and the other makes a bit of a kaboom noise. In July of the same year, the family overpowered and exploded Lieutenant Colonel Dmitry Shudakov, his wife, and their son, while they were parked on the shoulder of a road, and their daughter Veronica was, used that kitchen utensil on 37 times. The posse made off with a laptop, a hairdryer, and a camera. And they didn't strike again until 2010, and that's when they removed the eyes of two young women before taking their lives. They were eventually apprehended, and they were like, hey, we did nothing wrong. This was just another day in the life. Yeah, no, pass. Edward Harold Bell was an American offender, life taker, and the first fugitive to be featured in the Texan rendition of America's Most Wanted. According to his claims, his father, an oil field worker, frequently moved the family to various towns surrounding the Houston area, and allegedly suffered physical harm from both him, his scoutmasters at the Boy Scouts, and one of his cousins. Bell would also later claim in interviews that his father encouraged him to do violent crimes, we're talking robbing banks, taking advantage of women in a carnal nature, and encouraged him to take his own life. After graduation, he found work as a licensed diver, married his first wife, and the two moved to Texas. They had a family, it was great. Following his capture in Panama City in 1993, he was extradited, convicted, and sentenced to a 70-year term for the taking of life of a Marine, and later confessed to taking the lives of 11 others during the 1970s. Operating in the early 1900s, the Parr machine, the Parr family, functioned on bribery, graft, and illegal donations. So political support came from the southernmost counties in Texas. And this machine, or family, could produce large numbers of votes, legal and illegal, from impoverished and uneducated folks who were working class. And while this family had always asserted their influence over the county's affairs, it wasn't until Archer Parr that they were like, no, we feel secure enough to overwhelm the remaining independent white farmers by appealing directly to the county's new majority by offering them jobs, cash, in exchange for political support. George Parr engaged in the graft, the bribery, and the fraud, and his own political career included serving as county judge and sheriff, as well as owning the bank, a ranch, couple of ranches. He was also a partner and silent partner of dozens of businesses. He was convicted of tax evasion and there's a lot of conflicts of interest there. And the Murdoch family is another family. They were from South Carolina, and for 3 generations, Randolph Murdoch served as a prosecuting attorney. And the family's prominence led locals to call the 5-county district their county. So he established the family law firm, which specialized in personal injury litigation, and a 4th-generation son, Richard, led a life of crime. We're talking fraud, corruption, embezzlement, theft, all these offenses spanning decades and involving dozens of victims, many of whom were disadvantaged. This all came to a point in 2021 when he took the life of his wife Maggie and another member of the family using multiple weapons at close range. The Ptolemies of ancient Egypt ruled between 305 to 30 BC, and they are responsible for such a long list of mysterious passings that I can't even talk about all of them. They viewed family members as a fight to the end. It's a game. You have to constantly try to eliminate your closest relatives before they do it to you. So let's try and go through a couple. P IV, because we're making my life easy, ended the life of his mother, who had previously taken her husband's life because he was having an affair with her mother. He then married his sister Arsinoe III, who quickly lost her life after her husband/brother's passing. Her son, P V, had his mother's end-of-life takers ripped to pieces by a mob. P VII was either ended by his uncle or his father. We're not super sure about that. The history book isn't really clear. P VIII married Cleopatra II, but then had an affair with daughter Cleopatra III, and he had his son once again, torn into pieces and then sent them to his mother. His daughter ended her sister, Cleopatra IV. P the IX tried to take the life of his mother, Cleopatra III, and then married the first one, and then another sister. Yeah, both called Cleopatra. I could go on, but it's just a lot more angry mobs, end of lives, in bits and pieces, and I like to be in one. And that's all for today, folks. I've been Alexa, resident Ookie Spooky Girly. See ya!